let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show. Today we've got our good friend Matti.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Good. Doing good. It's cold. Feels like it's endless cold at the moment. But
I can definitely relate to the endless cold feeling right now. So it's been good. It's been good, but it's been cold.
Been good, but it's been...
And you're up in Canada, right?
I am up in sunny Canada, as we call it. As Clone High says, tropical Canada.
Is it a frozen tundra this time of the year?
I mean, it's not far off. Let's be fair. We're in the minuses, which in America is not nearly as cold as you'd think it is. I'm not good at converting the two, but from my understanding, if it's cold one place, it's still cold somewhere else. It just sounds much colder.
What's the phrase? If you're cold, they're cold, bring them inside. Like,
Yes. Chill the bears. That's the key.
yeah, very that. But Matti, we're very excited to have you today because we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're talking about art, and we're talking, I think, a little bit about your particular flavor of what you do with art, which, you know, we had a bit of a call before, we talked about it. It sounds interesting and exciting, and we're very excited to delve into it. So listen, you ready to get into it?
I'm good to go. I'm happy to talk about my body, my art, and my body of art. So
Fabulous, I love it. So on that, when did you first discover your passion for art in general?
accidentally. So art was something that I never thought I was very good at. Growing up, I remember I would always be a part of like my friend's drawing circle, and like when I was growing up, we would have date nights with my friend where we would all, you know how the parents kind of have this circulating thing where it's just like, oh, you spend a couple days with this parent, you spend a couple days with like your friend's parents. And there was always an artistic parent that we would go there and we would draw for hours and hours. But I was never the one who was good. I was always the one who was just kind of there. Everyone else was good. And because of that, I always kind of kept it with me. It's just like, oh, art is fun, but art isn't something I'm good at. So I kind of kept that narrative going up and through high school when I took an art class randomly, just being like, yeah, let's see if I'm better. And I wasn't, but I was different and I was interesting and I brought new things out. And I've always experimented with things like color and making things vibrant and interesting. And so it wasn't until college when I kind of reinvested in me and being like, hey, let's figure out if this art stuff that I do is something that I can create something with. And I kind of realized that I do have strengths because I can create stuff that's interesting and different, stuff that other people don't think of. And from there, it kind of grew into body painting, which was something that happened completely by accident. And I realized that it kind of amalgamates everything together where I was just like, I'm doing color, I'm doing form. And the more I do, the better I get at it. So I have a very, very confused history in art that way, but it's been a very interesting journey.
I can relate to that. I took art throughout my entire education, and then I was going to major in photography. Never actually managed to get into art school because it's fucking expensive. So
I
just decided to adapt it as a hobby instead.
Yeah, I cheated. I didn't actually take art in college. Like I took art classes, so I had like a minor in art, but I never went to an art college. Otherwise, I wouldn't be any good. I had to go out there and be like, you know what? I'm not good enough to do this. Let's do this anyways. And now I failed. And then I'm just like, hey, I'm great. So
That is such a weird thing too, the application process to art school. It's like you have to present all your stuff, and then they kind of look at it like, well, you know, it's okay. It's not really good enough for us. And then, like, I thought the whole point was to mold someone into being a better artist.
yeah, it's just like, oh, you mean I'm still great? How's that? Go with that. I'm still great.
Honestly, even though my style of art was never like that style of creative, I always did like theater and music and things like that. And it's very, very interesting that people love to look at the concept of technicality within art as if the point of art sometimes is to defy conventions, which of course then people love to be all like, no, you have to know the conventions in order to break the conventions and do it in a right way, which like, fine.
Yeah, but if you've ever been to a modern art museum, I mean, some of that stuff is that's in there. I'm like, I mean, I don't want to shit on it, but by the same token, I look at it and like, well, I could have done that too, and I didn't have to go to school for that.
Yeah. It's just like I understand why people think this is good and interesting, but also it's not, and you're wrong. So that's the key.
Like if I pissed on a crucifix and put it in a mason jar, I could call that art.
I someone did. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there is actually like crosses in P that have
Really?
been. Oh yeah, yeah. There was
Oh,
a one guy like postmodernism is fascinating because one guy just did a toilet. It's called the Fountain. It's like this big famous. It's literally just a toilet. It's called the Fountain. It's a very popular sculpture that someone bought from I don't know Russian Home Depot back in the day.
Oh, I love that. It's like public art, right? You see these gigantic sculptures that the city will proudly say, "We spent 100 million on this," and you just go, "That is a cactus." What? Like,
or
But
James,
they
it's like that episode of Ab Fab where Eddie bought all that art, that crappy art from the art installment, and she's like going around the room, she's like, "Well, this is sh soap scum on shower."
yeah,
good
yeah.
old Ab Fab.
Oh, love the reference. But listen, I think this is what's really interesting in talking to like an actual artist about this stuff, right? And like there is a reassurance, I think, because obviously tying this in with gaining, sometimes I feel like there is this idea of like, oh, some things are for some people, but not for all people, and sometimes you can kind of feel like a little bit left behind in those types of conversations. So this is good. I like that there's this opportunity to kind of like dip the toes in, learn a little something, and kind of like swim around in it for a minute. But to bring it back round to the gaining, much like you've told us your sort of history with art, can you share with us your history with your relationship with your body and your gaining journey as that's gone on over the years?
Well, it's funny because it's something I was always interested in. And the irony being is that I was actually anorexic for many years. Like I had an eating disorder that I struggled with through much of high school. And when you have that sort of thing, it never really goes away. So there's always that voice in your back of your head where you're just like, oh, I can't do this because I'm not the shape that I want to be. And bodies are interesting because we relate to them, we live in them, but it's the one thing that we can only control up to a certain point. Like you're never, no one ever thinks they have a perfect body. No one ever thinks that they're a perfect shape. So even when you're thinner, like you want to be thinner or you want to look different or there's something about your body that you're not going to like. If you're bigger, same thing. You're going to always want to get bigger. You're going to always want to do other things that way. So it's kind of for me my journey in terms of my body acceptance and my body awareness. I've tried gaining, I've tried losing, I've done fitness, I've done like you can do everything you want, but your body's never going to look the way that you think that you want it to look. Your body's always going to you're always going to see something wrong with your body because we all have some version of body dysmorphia. I'm just like unloading so much stuff on it. But the idea is that like even fit people look at their body and there's always something they want to change. So it's learning how to accept where you are at now. And that's one of the things that kind of kicked off my current project where I'm just like, I'm not entirely comfortable where I am right now. I sometimes want to be heavier. I sometimes want to be lighter. I'm always going to have that push and pull in my brain. So I'm just like, can I be comfortable with my body right now where I'm at? Can I be satisfied how I'm presenting myself? And can I be like, if I expose myself as I am now to the masses, to the world, will it resonate? Will it not resonate? Will anyone even care? And the answer is usually no. No one really cares what you look like or what you do. It's just when you present yourself as yourself, your body doesn't ultimately matter.
Hmm. I really like that point, that question of, am I like how do I feel good enough where I'm at right now? And that references, I think, wonderfully our episode, Am I Knuff? Right?
Yeah.
Which that was the whole point of the episode, was to explore like so much of gaining is this constant pushing of the goalposts. Like, oh, you thought you got there, but you got to go a little bit further. And it's like loving yourself as you are right now does not kill the gaining drive.
No.
Um, Like, not if your true intent is to keep growing and keep going. Like, to love yourself as you are now is just a really lovely treat to be like, oh, I am good enough. And because I love myself enough to know that I'm good enough, I'm also good enough to keep growing if that's what's right for me. Which,
Yeah.
go listen to the episode, peeps. That's the whole focal point. Um, but I love that you even reference it. It's not just about gaining there, it's also about everyone. It's one of those ways in which sometimes when we talk about gaining, I low key hope that there are civilians out there listening that like go, oh, they're talking about getting fat. And even though that specifically doesn't apply to me, like the body journey and self acceptance part still very much is for me because it is for everyone, right?
Yes.
Again, the kind of thing we were saying before about art, like sometimes you can feel like it's behind the locked door. It's like, well, no, the journey is for everyone. Self-acceptance and understanding and expressing yourself is also for everyone. So obviously, having now spoken a little bit about your history with both, tell us about bringing them together. Like obviously you mentioned you discovered body painting, but give us a little bit of a sense of like what was that period like for you in the kind of bringing the both of them together, and then how did that shape both your art and your journey with your body after the two kind of came together?
Well, the big thing is like when you're never comfortable in your body, the one thing I've kind of proclaimed throughout my body painting process is I've been doing this for about 10 years now. And I would always tell people one of the things that everyone would say when I would ask them if they want to get painted, it's just like, oh, when I lose 10 pounds. And it became such a cliche. Like I talk about it in my show a lot. I kind of talk about it every chance I get, but there's this idea that people have to look a certain way in order to present themselves as they are. And that's something I've been not fighting with people on for 10 years, but it's something that constantly comes up and will constantly come up. And it's something that anytime I ask civilian, gainer, whatever, it's this idea that we have that we shouldn't present ourselves until society can perceive us in a specific way, or when society will see us as we think we need to be presented. So for me, as I'm doing this project right now, which is every day I'm painting myself in public, as long as the funding comes in to do it, I will do it. But the idea is I'm presenting myself in all these ways, and it's I'm not entirely comfortable with how I look right now. In my head, I just like I don't I kind of wrestle with the thought of just like, should I be thinner? Should I be bigger? Where does my mind fit with that? And normally I am more at odds with myself because there's this idea of I should be thinking about myself in a specific way. I should be looking at myself in a specific way. And instead, what I'm doing is I'm presenting myself as I am. And that's possibly even scarier because I'm just like, I don't look like I did 10 years ago. I don't look like I did 15 years ago. I'm not a twink anymore. I'm not full bear. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm just like, I'm not fat enough for the I'm not fat enough for the chasers. I'm not thin enough for the twink chasers, whatever their name is. Meth addicts. There we go. Uh, there's a lot to me that I need to be comfortable with where I am right now. Because if I'm comfortable where I'm at right now and I'm presenting that, then ultimately it's just me being true to myself and me being genuine and saying I'm good enough. And having someone who isn't that typical perfect shape do this, I feel like it's a stronger statement because I'm saying, without saying anything, I'm saying, hey, look at my body as I am now. I'm valid, I'm sexy, I'm powerful. And you're going to, if you believe that this is worth supporting, then support it. So yeah, this originally started as a way for me to try, like originally started doing this whole painting thing to try to raise money for my friend's show. And then my friend's show only got into a handful of places. So I'm just like, I don't really need to keep doing this. But if I do keep doing this, where can I go with this? Is this something that people will rally behind if I don't look, quote unquote, look perfect? Is it still enough that I'm just showing up and saying, hey, body positivity matters. You can be larger and be sexy and get out there and be seen. And is that still valid? Will people rally around it? And right now the answer is but we're trying it. We're doing something else. We're being visible. And I feel like that's a stronger statement that I can make just by, even if I was skinnier, I don't think it would have be as impactful, even if it would be more popular. And if I was bigger, well, that would just be harder to paint because I have to lift everything around, and that's just trickier. But where I'm at right now, I'm just like, is this enough?
Those are some big questions, and yeah, shout out to all our mathematic listeners out there.
Yeah, all
Oh,
two of you.
yeah, yeah, all to it. They're just hanging off of every word, like, oh my goodness. Um, but I'm loving what you're saying. This is something, Tim. I think you and I talk about this. I don't know if we talk about this on the podcast, but I think we talk about this one on one because we constantly find that there is this like reevaluation of these labels and categories, right? This idea that in order for you to be considered a bear, you have to have a certain amount of body hair in a certain color and a certain place, and you have to have certain features. It's the same thing with when we gain, people can say as much as they want, like, oh, all fat is beautiful. And there are many of us, Tim and I included, who that's the damn truth. But there are many people out there who don't. They go, oh, your body and gains are only valid if it's apple gutted, ball bellied, masculine, looking like an ex jock, looking like a dude bro, trying to fit a fantasy, right? And all of these
And as long as it's constantly increasing, that's the
Yeah.
yeah,
other pressure. Yeah.
constantly increase.
My preferences before your preferences. That's what's valid. That's
Yeah, exactly. Like, so long as what I want is first and foremost, I could care less if you choke is essentially the unspoken that goes on, I think, a lot of the time. But it's interesting when we think about gaining, when we think about bodies, when we think about all the gay labels. Tim, I know you've shared your chagrin about these before.
Well,
But
I just think it's so funny that like I don't know what it is about gay men specifically that we have to categorize everything by animals. Like I don't understand that part.
I don't
You
know.
got you got
because
bear, otter, cub, wolf, bull.
it's because
Um,
we're not human. Duh.
Yes, exactly. We are all subpar faggots. Amen. Hallelujah. Praise be. But what I think is really interesting is, as you say, when you fall in between the distinctions of these specific categories, people kind of look at you like, no, well, you're not quite this and you're not quite that. I don't know what to do with you. You're
Yeah.
not quite a bear. And if you were a bear, I'd presume that you were masculine and straight acting and, XYZ. And if you were a twink, I'd assume you were feminine and acted a certain type of way. But you're in the middle. I don't know what to do with this. And like,
That's why they invented that idiotic word twunk. I was like, when I heard that, I was like, no, we're not going to make that happen. I am not going to be called a twunk.
yeah, I know. People love to be like, oh, a straight person came up with this on that sunny Philadelphia show. And they're like, let's just take that on. Like, no, straights don't get to define us. But, anyways, the
Yeah.
point being, when you fall in between some definitions, that is in many ways a scarier place to be, as you were saying, because people know what to do with you when you fit an idea. And when you don't, people love to let you know that they're like, you don't look like this.
Yeah, well, people are here's the thing. Everyone's entitled to their opinion because they're all wrong. Like that's the idea. My whole thing is I'm just like I think the past year for me has been like casting off a lot of labels, casting off a lot of shadows, and being like, I am who I am, and this is where my brain is, this is the direction I'm going. Come with me or get the fuck out of the way. I'm I'm very I'm not super masculine, I'm not super feminine. I'm very artistic. And because of that, I do tend to see things and look at things very differently because I'm at the point where people are just like, "Oh, what are you? Are you Trevor?" And just like, I'm an artist, and unfortunately, that colors all of my life to the point where, like, even gaining and encouraging is a world I have been a part of since like beefy frat, get bigger days. Like, it's something that's a part of my sexual DNA, and it's something that for many, many years I was extremely ashamed of. And then the more I've kind of dove into it, I'm just kind of like, oh, it's a fairly shallow pool in terms of the connections that you can make with people. You instantly have a connection with the brotherhood across the world, but there's not a lot of connection beyond the thing that you're attracted to. And it's the same for like gay people, it's the same for straight people. So even though you're a part of this giant tribe, quote unquote tribe, uh what you do with that ultimately, there's a lot of different social aspects, there's a lot of different tribunal aspects of it that you're still not going to gravitate towards. because ultimately we're a fetish as a part of a sexuality. And we don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to be femme. We don't have to be masculine. We don't have to be, you can be non-binary. You can be anything you want. So limiting ourselves to just the tags or the labels that we've come into, and it's kind of a shallow thing, but at the same time, it's something that over the past year I've been shedding off and being like, casting away the things that don't do me so good anymore. And yeah, the more you kind of investigate and realize that, the better things get for you.
Mm.
If any of that made any sense, I don't know. But
No, I think so. I think so. And I think this is ultimately something that I've often said about gaining in general. Gaining is a freedom from these bodily expectations of the world. No matter what body type you are in, larger or smaller, society at large says, well, you need to be thin. And if you're already thin, well, you make sure you get thinner. And if you're as thin as you could possibly be, and we can't endorse you getting further anorexic, even though we totally are, you better do your best to stay atop of that pile, because if you fall, you've got the farthest to fall. And if you let yourself fall after all the hard work you put in to get to, well, then you should just go and kill yourself. You know, like, it is this intense rhetoric that causes so many people to hate themselves, and it affects everyone. Gaining in so many ways is a wonderful freedom from that, because every kind of goal you have to gain weight goes against the grain. So
Yep.
there is no moment where you get caught up in society's expectations of who you are and what you do. And in order for you to get caught up in what gainers expect of you, you engage with gainers. And if you don't want that, you just take a step back and go, I'm just going to focus on me and do my own thing. So you really do get the opportunity to see what it's like behind the scenes of that societal crush of expectation. So I think what you're talking about when it comes to, no matter your size, your journey, your gender, your sense of presentation, all of those aspects of your human self, same thing. Owning yourself in whatever way you manifest is very, very empowering. Challenging, of course, but very, very empowering. There is something I want to ask here real quick, just before we come back to this. I know that you did some units in fine art, and I feel like this is one of those concepts that people often get lost in. Like, I know we were talking like postmodern for a brief period before, and I feel like, I don't know, my understanding of art is kind of broken down into those two categories. It's either macaroni and cheese that gets stuck on the fridge, or it's Botticelli. Like, that's the way it's kind of explained, you know what I mean? So can you shed some light on the fine side of that?
I feel like fine art is a great myth. I feel like fine art is the distinction. Fine art is kind of the label that like elitism kind of gives to a specific number of artists. I would argue that fine art is anything that an artist has put work and effort and time into and has respected enough to put themselves out there and say, this is something that or at least I hope will improve the world or make the world better in a certain way. Uh, the double-edged sword of that is that I don't think that any artist can proclaim themselves to be fine art. I feel like it's other people have to see the value in what you're doing, and that would be what would make it fine art. So macaroni and glue on paper, like to a parent hanging it on a fridge, arguably that's fine art because it's brought joy, it's brought something nice into the parent's life. Unless they secretly hate it, then then they're just, which of course they do. Let's be fair, it's macaroni art. But no one likes kids in the first place. We just got to move on with that myth. But as we do,
No,
fine
no,
art
no,
is,
no offense meant to any of our audience listeners who might have children.
yeah, I say things, but it's only because I mean them. No, uh,
No offense to
there,
parents who went out of their way to have children, but
yeah.
full offense to all children who happen to be listening. Go away.
I will
Um,
say this: 100% of children that have ever existed are the worst people ever, including us.
yeah,
So, you know,
that's a
we are
very
the worst and best versions of ourselves.
that's very very good. Yeah, agreed. um, no, and I wanted to ask about this because I think, much like you say, there's this idea around like a certain scope of art, and I mentioned Botticelli before. Like, he's the one who did the Venus, right?
Yep.
Venus in the Shell. I feel like a lot of the times when we as gainers want to try and put our little fingernails out there and go, we've existed for a long time. Botticelli was a chubby chaser. He made Venus a fat girl, yada yada. And be all like, and that's fine art, right? Like this propagation that there's some kind of secret history where fat was the most incredible thing ever. Um, I mean, based on your knowledge of art, and I'm not obviously trying to insinuate that you're some kind of lexicon of like all things art in general, but like, is there a history of plus size representation in art suggesting that there's like a societal appreciation for fat before the modern century?
Well, I think that that's always been the case, to be fair. Like, bigness usually presumed wealth, presumed health. So remember, these are like, even back in the day, people were starving, and it was more common to be starving and unwell and die young than it was to be healthy or big or anything. Like, think Henry VIII. He was a large man, and it's well documented. And that was seen as, like, today he would be mocked and ridiculed and everything else. But back then, power, it was all about enforcement. It was all about, it was looked at as a
Masculinity.
great masculinity, huge form of respect. And it was that way. If you were big, that implied that you were rich, that implied that you were healthy, it implied like you were knowledgeable in a lot of ways. And that idea didn't really change, like, let's be fair, up until probably the 60s with Twiggy and the whole like the new era of the supermodels, and it became skinny was the new in, and that intensified up till the 70s and 80s. Like, think about it, eating disorders are a radically new thing. The idea of being thin to be in, that's very modern. You look at the
Like,
50s housewives, and like, even they had some chonk in the badonk. And as it kind of went on, it wasn't until, like, the reason I'm kind of picking on Twiggy is because she really glamorized the idea of being thin. And since it kind of built upon that. So I don't even think it's just art. I think it's society in large went from admiring the larger form to being thin as in, and that idea of perceived health. Even though the idea, like, right now where we're at, what you want to be, like, what most people want to be now is just healthy. I don't think anyone's still trying to be super duper duper skinny, except for, like, obviously everything else. Now it's all plastic surgery. Now you just want to look terrible all the time. You just get your lips done. That's just, I'm being too mean to people. Plastic
well,
surgery is just another form of body modification
yeah.
that can go too far. But all forms of body modification can go too far. But as long as it makes you happy and it's not like impacting, as long as you're here long enough to enjoy it, knock yourself out,
Mm.
right?
I think that's a really good place to point to, really, because art is ultimately the creative representation of things, thoughts, feelings, ideas, right? And art represents what we have decided is correct in the world. It's a reflection of history and whatnot. It's the meme about Jesus is white in so much of representation because the people painting Jesus were white and wanted to propagate the notion of a white Jesus, despite clear Arabic ethno-Palestinian roots and whatnot
Guys,
from the region.
Jesus was clearly purple. I just want to throw that out.
Yes, after being beaten the shit out of and hung on a cross for a couple of days, yes, definitely purple in color.
That just made my inner Catholic cringe.
Like,
Then the
if
conversation's going in the right direction.
why why did the gay go to church? Because he heard there was a guy hung like this. It's just,
But yes, I think it's really important at that point that like art is ultimately the representation of what we think is important, and I think that's a really interesting point when we think about this new thing of like gainer AI art that people are trying to propagate. When you think about, the Warren Davis of it all, even going back a bit further, we have always projected this idea of a certain shape or notion onto the very nature of who we want to see ourselves as, right? Like, I think that's very, very fascinating. And really, when we come down to the notions of gaining, the obvious correct approach to gaining is just to love yourself enough to grow yourself enough to whatever is correct for you. And that's
Yeah.
obviously it. And yet, what inspires us is very rarely human reference points. It's almost exclusively like these extremes, these motifs that give you an idea or something that's ultimately unattainable, but somehow drives you forward. I find that very, very fascinating. Um,
One thing I've always noticed is that, like, in the gainer community especially, like, there's always the drive to be bigger, but like, it's okay to lose weight. It's okay to lose. It's okay to be, it's okay to
Say that
maintain.
again. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Say
Like,
it again.
your body is yours. You need to be happy in your body. If you're not happy in it, change it. You want to get a tattoo? Get a tattoo. You want to go pierce your face? Go for it. Like, there's the idea of really all gaining is just another form of body modification. That's really all it is. And you're just like, it's no different than any of, like, growing a beard or growing your hair. It's as your body is as normal as you are. So if you want to grow it, grow it. If you want to lose, lose. Like, you need to be happy in your own skin, and whatever you can do to improve that happiness, do it. So, like, right now, I'm not on a strong gain kick, and there's a very real chance I never will again. I might I might lose, I might maintain, I might just let it do what it does, but like, I don't feel any need to be a specific way right now, because I'm already painting myself every day in public. What else do I need to do? But like, I like cheeseburgers, and I like to go on runs sometimes. So be happy. If you're
Mm.
happy, then you're good. So just be happy.
I want to reference here something, because of course, growing up in Australia, Māori people have a tradition called tamoko, which is basically face tattooing and face art. And there's real moves at the moment where you've got people being elected to parliament there who represent tamoko. And of course, you've got fucking ignorant fucks all around the world being like, that's inappropriate for the office. You can't have that on your face. But it's not just a body modification that makes someone happy, that's also a cultural lineage. Like, there are reference points all across the globe, not just in Caucasian history, people, where like doing different things to your body is not only yours to decide, but also uplifted and celebrated and representative of 50 million different things. So, absolutely, Maddie, to that dang point. And we've mentioned weight loss on the podcast before, it's not about saying, oh, you should or shouldn't, or there are certain circumstances. It's like, no, what we're doing as gainers is changing our bodies already. Why is it literally such a heart attack inducing thing for people to suggest people going in the opposite direction?
Yeah.
Like,
There's like, the only issue is there, if you're telling anyone that they need to look a specific way, that's the issue. Like, people are autonomous beings, even if, like, I don't know, even if you sign a contract with a master or whatever, like, they're still choosing to follow certain things. But people are people. They're allowed to do what they want. They're allowed to gain, they're allowed to lose, and we can celebrate them going either way. As long as they're happy, keep them happy.
absolutely. And on that point, people, when you want to try and critique someone's gaining journey, that's called gain shaming. We don't support that here on the podcast. And if we haven't done an episode about that in the past, we'll be doing one in the future. Time is a wibble wobble, and I don't know where an episode about gain shaming is going to fall in the stack, so we'll figure that out and edit it out if needed. Um, but this is such a great conversation, honestly. So to bring it back around to your body painting, because I feel like the obvious kind of interpretation of that is like you see yourself as a work of art and it's bringing out ideas of art on your body and the way that we see ourselves, and like I feel like that's a very obvious interpretation of it, but like tell us more about like what is it about body painting specifically, and at least where you're at now, what is it about body painting that kind of gives you the whole, this is the moment, this is the thing.
The whole reason I started body painting in the first place was because I wanted to find a way to share people's personalities on their skin. So I wanted to find a way that people could kind of show off who they were. And so that's what started. Initially, it was called the Human Canvas Project years and years ago. But as it's changed and evolved since then, I don't know what it's called right now. It might just be my painting from now on. But I'm not that shameless. Actually, I am. I probably will be and should be, because why not be proud of what you do? But the idea has always been, if we have value, then we should show ourselves with that full amount of value. We should be able to showcase ourselves, showcase our inner selves on the outside as much as we can. We already do it in many ways, like what you wear, how you shave your head, or what you wear with your beard, any tattoos you have. That's all already showing off who you are in a different way. So this is just kind of taking that a step further and being like, what colors do I resonate with? What do I think is interesting to share with people in terms of, like, if I emulate Dali or Picasso or another master on my body, like, how does that impact things? So there's a lot to engage with and enjoy there. So yeah, in terms of how I feel in my skin when I'm painted, uh, depending where, usually cold. Up in Toronto, once I paint myself, I'll then go outside to get a photo taken because the lighting's nicer. I did it the first few weeks in the store, but then after I've just gone outside, because I'm just like, it's brutally cold, but it's interesting and the pictures end up nice and it makes me feel very secure and confident. And when I look at my paintings, I still get distracted where I'm just like, oh, I'm showing too much belly there, or I look like that. And then I'm just kind of have to tell myself to shut the fuck up. Because if I can and then others can, then if I can still feel that connection or have that experience, I gotta go for it. I don't know if any of that was what we were starting to talk about, but that's
No, but I mean, like that's it's interesting hearing about your thoughts and your process on this because I think ultimately what we're wanting to explore here is the body and the art and how they come together and what that means for you because when it comes to gaining, and I know we talked a little bit about this before, like when you don't fit in a certain category, I feel like a lot of gainers go through that struggle of like, I don't want to take photos right now, I don't want to show myself, I don't want to talk about progress. Some of us get so in our heads about it that it's like, I don't even want to hear about your progress. If you're having
yeah.
successes, kill yourself. Don't talk to me. Don't even look in my direction. I don't want to be on Instagram right now. I'm quitting Grommr. I'm leaving everything behind because the stress that we can feel, this level of dissatisfaction that we feel in our spirit when we look at our body and don't like what we see, I think can be so destructive at times. And again, coming from that place of gaining constantly pushes people to be ever changing in one direction, no excuses, because apparently that's how bodies work. So it's wonderful to hear about there are these moments where you might challenge yourself and be like, oh, I don't necessarily like how I look in this photo because of my shape. But then you have to challenge yourself and say, shut the fuck up, move along. It is what it is. This is almost better because it's more authentic, because this is just where you're at right now with all of your quote unquote imperfections in this body that maybe isn't exactly where you want it to be. That kind of reclaiming of space, reclaiming yourself from within your own self. I don't know, I just feel like as gainers, that's something that we all really fucking struggle with. So it's wonderful to hear how you use your art to do that. So it's good.
Yeah. I think a lot of, like, it's something we've talked about a lot, me and some of my friends here and just different people in the scene, but like how much shame that we as humans carry around. But when it comes to things like gaining or sex or anything relating to any of that, like the amount of shame that you carry around is paramount and will usually drive you to either want to engage with Grommr or gainerism or anything else, or like it'll, like, the shame part of it is usually such a stimulant for people that they don't even realize, because they feel like they have to do, I don't know if it makes any sense, but the whole idea of just when we're so focused on specific things that we're so ashamed that we don't have specific things or that we're not perfect, or there's just so much there that's so connected, and like gaining, sex, shame, it's all so intertwined in this weird way where if you don't achieve a certain thing, then people feel bad about it. And if they do achieve a certain thing, they still feel bad about it because they don't know how to accept that gaining is a part of you, or that your kinks are a part of you, or that it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack.
The constant journey of this podcast is going, no one's usually had this type of conversation in a public forum before, and we're just getting stuck in with a list of questions and just kind of hoping we can make a little bit of headway. The tapestry, she's big, a lot of weaving to get done. But again, I
It's
think
an ever expanding canvas, right?
literally.
Yeah.
But again, I think the reason why all this is wonderful is because, as we were saying, so many of our bodies fall into this amorphous moment in the middle where we don't feel like we're quite in the right place. Art is encapsulative of so much of that amorphousness already. So I think it makes sense that sometimes we can feel a little bit like you keep asking, like, oh, is this making sense? I don't know. Like, but I think it's reasonable that we can get stuck on that because it's like, well, again, we're used to this idea of like we're striking to a specific point or a specific body type or a specific definition, and when we're not, sometimes we kind of get in the mire a bit where we're a bit like, oh, we're trying to figure it out and work our way through. And I think sometimes even in these discussions with the podcast, we forget that the esoteric and the kind of undefined is just as much a part of the experience as the defined and the specific. So I think this is wonderful and such a fantastic subject to do that on. Um, just quickly here before we move on, I really want to focus on your work and what's coming next for you. Are there any specific points on gaining and art and maybe what you do specifically that we haven't touched on yet that you'd like to bring into the conversation?
I think I've talked about most aspects of my art and just my relationship to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot that we can. I have a huge hatred of AI art. I think I went through that whole phase where for a little while all of us were super excited by what like gaining AI art looked like. So I think that
Yeah.
there was something so cool about it for like a minute. And now I'm just like, oh, they all look dead. This is just scary now. Like it's all the same. So when I love that some people are just like, hey, this is art. I'm just like, is it though?
Yeah.
It's,
If you put it through a generator, that doesn't feel much like art. That kind of just feels like the lottery
yeah,
in a sense. So it
It's just
almost,
an instant gratification thing. Like I have an AI app that I play around with, but I don't take it seriously. And I would
no.
never like try to pass it off as like, oh guys, look at this you know, like no, I just typed in random words and this is what it came up with. And you know, I treat it like a game, you know, like a gaming app. I just type in like what kind of crazy shit can I come up with? And if it's like really interesting looking, I might like share it with a friend, but I don't take it seriously at all.
Yeah, sometimes you see something that's really cool and it's interesting and engaging. You're just like, oh, yay, that inspires me to create something. That's kind of where I'll take it a lot of times. But
yeah.
most of the time, I'll just see it and be like, oh, that's sad people with 7 fingers. That's not great. So,
Yeah, there was a thing that went around a little while back, and I had some fun taking part in this. It was like AI Funko Pop art, right? And
yeah,
that was fun because a Funko Pop is already like a not real thing. So it's just kind of fun to see like how much like me can I make this Funko figurine look like me? And that was fun. But then I looked on the Funko Pop website and like the specs that you can use to create a Funko Pop that looks like someone are so limited. So I was a
hmm,
bit like, oh, well, I suppose in this instance, the AI part was useful slash fun because it kind of defied the normative conventions of what's already there to create something more specific. But also, it wasn't trying to create something that was like reminiscent of something else. It was trying to be like, there is no other way to get it, therefore let's do that and do the thing. But also, that was all it was. It was just a bit of fun. Whereas you see a lot of these blogs that are like literally gainer AI Instagrams with 12,000 followers at the moment, and it's just like all these guys who look the same, ridiculously distended bodies, and I'm a little bit like, what about this is meant to be attractive?
I
yeah.
think that those rose in popularity because you could turn a celebrity into them. You know, so all of the guys that
Oh
anyone
yeah.
has ever drooled over, your Henry Cavills, your Tom Hollands, your Tom Hardys, you know, now all of a sudden they could create an image that had the face of the person that they wanted on the body that they wanted to see it on. So I think that's why that really took off.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know, and I think even in the conversation we're having now, it's sort of like I can think in my head, like, oh, there is a reason why I did that. I think that's viable. But then, is it? the whole use of like AI as a public modem is such a new thing, and it will be interesting to see how that conversation develops over the next few years. But I feel like anyone sensible who has friends who do any kind of art, artists are saying don't bypass artists to use AI because that's kind of cheap.
I
Like,
would know, like, I would like all the stupid stuff that I do on my, it's not as if I would ever try to pass it off as something legitimate and then charge money for it. And then I wouldn't pay for something that was obviously done through an app.
Yeah.
You know,
no,
like,
that's true. That was weird. I did see someone being like, "Oh, pay me to AI generate," and I'm like, "Baby, that's a free app." Like, I understand we're all very excited right now, but like, calm your farm. You know what I mean? But again, I think maybe that's also part of it. Like, maybe one of the reasons why art is special is because it is made by a particular person with a particular reference point. You can't recreate that in an app because anyone can download that app, give the exact same prompts, and wind up with the exact same thing. Is it really that special? You know, I don't really reckon it is. But Maddie, tell us more. Tell us more of your thoughts.
Well, I say coming as an artist, like there is a real impact of AI art in the artistic scene. And on the one hand, sure, it can make art more accessible. You can theoretically create everything you want, but it will always lack because there can be something very intense about when you're making something with your hands, when you're making something unique. The great thing about doing body art is that I'm just like, I'm pretty sure that AI cannot recreate this because this is an in-person real experience of a human painting himself in front of a mirror, and it's really fucking hard and it's cold, and you get all that experience on my body, on my face, and I go outside and I get real reactions from real people. With AI, you'll always have that glassy look in the eye because there's no intensity there. There's no thought behind the process. There's no creation element there. So, yeah, I
Hmm.
have nothing. I think AI art is a very interesting tool that can be used. I don't think it should be used commercially. I don't think it should be used. I think it can spark inspiration, but it shouldn't be used to be the creation itself.
Yeah. I want to ask here because you mentioned that you've done Fringe, you've got a show that you've put together, which is wonderful. It's wonderful, I think, for any artist to be able to produce and create their own thing. For you, where do you want to take it? Like, do you have any dreams or desires in the immediate that you want to take? Are there any particular plans or anything up and coming you want to talk to people about?
Ultimately, this is a show that is extremely compact and extremely able to be brought anywhere. My goal would be to take it everywhere. I want to take the show across Canada, across the world, anywhere with a theater that wants to host me, I will go to. I'm just gonna put that APB out right now. Hire me. I'm very inexpensive. I come with my set. It's very great. But no, I just want to. This is something that's very compact and very able to be taken out there. And I kind of feel like I spent the last 10 years or so prepping in a way, and now I'm ready to take this to. I'd like to take it to Prides. I'd like to take it to different theaters. I think it's at a point where it can start to really in the theme of the evening to expand, to grow, to become so much more. And I'm at a point where I'm ready to do it. So that's the hope.
Fabulous. And just as we begin to close out here, for anyone who's maybe thinking, obviously we've talked a bit about fine art, AI art, art in general. For anyone who has thoughts and feelings about art in general, and maybe those thoughts and feelings are related some way in conjunction with their body, their journey, any number of different things of that, right? What is something you would want to say to those listeners to maybe kind of encourage them to take the next right step for them, however that manifests?
The one thing I will say is to anyone who wants to get started with anything, gaining, art, working out, whatever you want, like it just takes the first step and then to just trust yourself to take another one. So I have ADHD. I'll never say plan anything, but I will always say make time to follow what you're trying to do. So even if it's just like, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to doodle on a notebook. I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to have a cheeseburger. I'm going to take 10 minutes. I like whatever it is, and just walking in place or walking down the street or going outside. Like it's all about starting and then just committing to it. And that's all you could do. Like this project I'm doing right now, it's built on 10 years of me just being like, hey, maybe I'll try this. And then like 3 years of a terrible relationship that stopped a lot of that progress. But now getting back to it and having that be like integral to what I know is coming next. So yeah, small steps take you on a long journey. So don't expect it to be everything all at once. Just start small.
Well, Matti, that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on most social media networks. I am under the Big Shabam or the Gain Project, depending where you're at. I'll send all the relevant links, of course. I'm on Patreon under Matti McLean if you want to contribute specifically to my art. And this probably isn't going out tomorrow, so it won't have much relevance. But if you go to can'tstandsittingproductions.com, you can contribute to my art there and see if it's still going. Then you can contribute to a day.
Fabulous. Well, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccmouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/thiccradio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thethiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stannon.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.